Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a massive, dual-sided reality today: how generative AI is structurally rewiring the global labor market. We hear these sweeping claims about artificial intelligence every single day, right? But today, we're cutting through the noise. We're looking strictly at the hard data to uncover what is actually happening to jobs, productivity, and human expertise. Which brings us to the core mystery we need to solve. If generative AI is really this unbelievably fast, why on earth haven't we seen a massive economic boom yet? We constantly hear stories about AI doing the work of 100 people in seconds. So it's absolutely worth asking why that massive task-level efficiency isn't showing up in the broader macroeconomic data. Well, here is our roadmap to figure that out. First, the productivity paradox. Then, compressing the skill gap. Next, democratizing mass expertise. After that, we'll look at hidden traps and structural risks. And finally, designing an equitable future. Starting off with Section 1, the productivity paradox, macro mystery versus micro reality. Let's start with the big picture, because there is a massive disconnect going on in economic forecasts right now. On one hand, you have market analysts at Goldman Sachs projecting a colossal 7%, that's roughly $7 trillion global GDP bump over the next 10 years, all based on rapid downstream cost savings. But then, on the flip side, MIT academic purists like Daron Acemoglu forecast less than a 1% growth in total factor productivity over that exact same decade. Why such a gap? Because while AI crushes easy-to-learn tasks, it still severely bottlenecks when it comes to complex, unstructured, hard-to-learn work. It is a staggering difference in expectations. But here is what's really fascinating. This research actually resolves our initial paradox. It comes down to something called the productivity J-curve. Basically, general-purpose technologies like AI require massive, unmeasured upfront investments. Companies right now are pouring resources into training, completely redesigning workflows, and building custom software. All of that intensive capital allocation forms the downward stem of the J-curve. So it temporarily hides the true economic gains until those investments finally mature and the actual integration accelerates. All right, moving to Section 2, compressing the skill gap, the novice advantage. Let's zoom in from the macroeconomy all the way down to an individual worker sitting at their desk. The microeconomic data shows literal hyperproductivity right out of the gate. In a rigorous study by Noy and Zhang, 453 college-educated professionals were given ChatGPT 3.5. The result? A 40% reduction in the time it took to complete writing-intensive tasks. But get this, they didn't just do it faster. Blind evaluators rated their output quality as 18% better. So they were nearly twice as fast and remarkably better. And when you look at productivity improvements inside a Fortune 500 customer support team, something even more amazing stands out. The highest skilled agents, they actually saw zero improvement, no change at all. But the lowest skilled novices saw a massive 36% boost. What's happening here is that AI effectively ingests the tacit, deep knowledge of your absolute best experts and literally hands it to your novices. It creates a phenomenon known as skill compression. The playing field is leveling out incredibly fast. And hey, this labor enrichment isn't just happening at the office. It's spilling right over into our homes. Stanford research tracked massive amounts of internet browsing data and found that households perform digital chores, things like personal travel planning or, thankfully, financial budgeting, up to 176% more efficiently when using AI. By essentially fast-forwarding through these tedious tasks, we're freeing up huge chunks of time for leisure or upskilling. This takes us to Section 3, democratizing mass expertise, the end of routine. You see, generative AI isn't just about doing things faster. It is fundamentally restructuring who even gets to be an expert in the first place. Take a look at this bold quote from NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. Traditional coding is dead. He's arguing that because AI serves as an abstraction layer, plain old human language is rapidly becoming the ultimate programming language. This is effectively closing the technology divide, turning anyone with a logical mind and some domain expertise into a highly functional programmer. So we're witnessing this wild pivot in the labor market. We are actively moving away from syntax-heavy routine coding toward what industry leaders are dubbing the revenge of the liberal arts. The market demand is shifting heavily toward humanistic skills, critical thinking, structural questioning, semantic precision. If you can clearly articulate a complex problem, you are going to be highly valued in this new economy. This aligns perfectly with the thesis of MIT economist David Autor. He argues that AI is not just an automation tool out to eliminate jobs, but rather it's a collaboration tool. By integrating vast databases with structured rules, AI acts as this massive force multiplier for human judgment. It allows non-elite workers, think paralegals or nurse practitioners, to execute complex, high-stakes decisions. It effectively expands mass expertise and could actually help rebuild the middle skill core of our economy. But here comes Section 4, Hidden Traps and Structural Risks, the dark side of augmentation. Because just as we start feeling super optimistic, we have to confront the plot twist of this explainer. There are severe, long-term risks hidden within these incredibly powerful tools. Let's walk through what's called the augmentation trap. Step 1. A worker offloads a cognitive task to AI for a quick, immediate productivity boost. Step 2. Because they aren't doing the deep, messy work themselves, they fail to develop foundational skills or tacit knowledge. And step 3. The worker permanently de-skills. Think about it. If you constantly outsource your thinking to a machine for a short-term efficiency bump, you fall right into this trap, and you ultimately end up less capable than you were before you even adopted the AI. And look, this isn't just academic theory. We're already seeing the structural fallout of this exact dynamic. Stanford data highlights a really concerning 13% decline in employment for 22 to 25-year-olds working in early career occupations that are highly exposed to generative AI. Which leads us directly into the first-rung problem. Historically, routine tasks like formatting pitch decks or triaging IT tickets were exactly what justified hiring junior staff in the first place. If organizations just automate away all those entry-level tasks, they accidentally remove the very first rung of the career ladder. Junior workers completely lose the opportunity to acquire industry context, they miss out on critical mentorship, and ultimately the organization destroys its own future middle management pipeline and leadership capacity. The Swedish fintech company Klarna serves as a fascinating, real-world cautionary tale for this. Between 2024 and 2025, they aggressively pursued an AI-first substitution model. Their AI assistant handled 2/3 of all inbound customer chats. It executed the work of 853 full-time agents, generated $60 million in savings, and allowed them to essentially slash their global headcount in half. Naturally, they celebrated this massive, short-term transactional efficiency. But watch what happened next. Faced with plunging customer satisfaction on complex emotional issues, not to mention rising customer churn, Klarna was forced to course-correct in 2026 into a hybrid workforce model. They quickly realized they needed a Tier 1 autonomous AI for the routine stuff, sure, but they also needed a Tier 2 AI-assisted human co-pilot for nuanced cases, and a Tier 3 pure human ownership model for complex disputes and fraud. They learned the hard way that cheap transactional efficiency simply cannot replace human trust-building and nuanced problem-solving. And this underscores exactly why Klarna is not an isolated case. An extensive survey of the C-suite found that out of the 39% of companies that implemented AI-driven redundancies, a staggering 55% reported regretting those decisions. They confused cheap task execution with actual purpose delivery, and they ended up degrading their brand equity in the process. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Designing an Equitable Future, Beyond Substitution. So how do we actually navigate this incredible technological transition without leaving a huge chunk of the global workforce behind? Well, here is the global macroeconomic forecast. The transition is projected to eliminate 92 million jobs by 2030. Yes, but simultaneously create 170 million new positions. That is a net global expansion of 78 million jobs. But make no mistake about it, the distributional consequences of this shift are going to be highly unequal unless we make some targeted interventions. To ensure those benefits are shared fairly, we absolutely must implement systemic interventions. We need to treat continuous upskilling not as some corporate charity program, but as core national infrastructure. We've got to implement ethics by design to steer AI toward human complementary systems, rather than just substitution. And critically, we have to close the digital literacy and smartphone gap, especially for the 945 million disconnected women globally who face a highly disproportionate risk of displacement. Which brings us to our final thought for the day. Will we use artificial intelligence merely as a cheap tool for short-term headcount reduction, or will we choose to structurally enrich human capability?
Ultimately, the impact of generative AI isn't predetermined by the technology itself. It is a profound institutional choice, leaving us to decide right now what kind of future we really want to build. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope it leaves you looking at the future of work just a little bit differently.